I've worked this bar for 5 years. I've served senators, athletes, people who used to sit at my dinner table back when I had a dinner table worth sitting at. Last Tuesday, I served a man who had my birthmark on his wrist and the same name I carved onto a headstone 30 years ago. My name is Leonard Whitfield. I'm 58 years old. The Harrington Grand Hotel is one of the finest hotels in the city. Marble floors, 22-foot ceilings, custom light fixtures that cost more per piece than most people's cars. I know exactly what everything in this lobby cost because I designed it. Whitfield Design Group won the commission in 2001 and I spent 14 months on that project. Now I stand behind the bar I specified. In the room I drew from scratch, and I pour drinks for people who used to return my calls. Some nights that sits fine, some nights it doesn't. I lost the firm in the divorce. Diana was the attorney handling our business filings, which turned out to be the kind of mistake that only looks obvious in hindsight. When she decided the marriage was over, she already had everything she needed. 2 years of proceedings later, she walked away with the company, the house, and a settlement that left me starting over at 53. I took the bartending job because Gerald Norris, my bar manager, had worked for me back when I had people working for me. He offered. I needed something. That's the whole story. Diana remarried 2 years after the divorce. She goes by Diana Hartwell now. Last I heard, she was being considered for a seat on the state bar ethics board, which is the kind of thing that can keep a man up at night if he lets it. I don't let it, or I try not to. The Tuesday that changed everything started like every other. I came in at 400, restocked the top shelf, went over the reservation list with Gerald. One name stood out: Hargrove, Penthouse Suite, VIP dining, single guest. Gerald told me the man rarely came down to the bar, but when he did, he wanted quiet and good service. Clifford Hargrove, tech CEO, early 30s. I'd seen the name in business news but didn't know much about him. That was fine. I don't need to know a man's net worth to make him a decent drink. He came down at 8:15. Tall, dark hair, moved like someone who had been the most competent person in every room he'd ever walked into. He took the corner stool, the one with a view of both the entrance and the room, and picked up the menu without sitting all the way back in the chair. Alert, watchful. I noticed that. What do you recommend? He asked. Old-fashioned if you want something proven. Bartender's choice if you want something better. He set the menu down. Bartender's choice. I started mixing. He pulled out his phone and started reading, and his right hand came down flat on the bar, and his fingers started tapping. 4 beats, pause. 2 beats. My hands went still. That is my pattern. I have done that exact thing my whole life on desks, on steering wheels, on the edge of drafting tables. My ex-wife told me 100 times it drove her crazy. It's not a rhythm from any song, it's just something my hands do when my mind is working. I told myself it was a coincidence. I kept mixing. Then he reached for the glass I slid across the bar, and his sleeve pulled back 2 inches, and I saw it, crescent moon, right wrist, small, clean-edged, unmistakable. I have the exact same mark in the exact same place. I have had it my whole life, and the baby boy I held in a hospital room on April 14th, 1995. Had one too. I saw it clearly in the 2 hours I held him before a doctor came in and told me his lungs had given out. The glass was in my hand and I set it down on the bar without dropping it, which took more effort than I want to admit. Enjoy, I said. He nodded and went back to his phone. I walked to the far end of the bar and stood there for a moment with my back to the room. 30 years is a long time to carry something. You think you've made your peace with it. You go to the cemetery twice a year. You put the shoebox in the back of the closet and you don't open it more than once every few years. You build a life around the absence of the thing you lost, and eventually the absence just becomes part of the shape of your life. And then a stranger sits down at your bar and taps his fingers in your rhythm and shows you a mark on his wrist that no one else in this world is supposed to have. I went home that night and I did not sleep. The shoebox was exactly where I left it. Back of the closet shelf, behind a jacket I hadn't worn in 3 years. I sat at the kitchen table at 2 in the morning and went through everything in it. Hospital bracelet. A photograph, grainy and small, taken by a nurse who had the decency to ask the paperwork from the cemetery. A card from the funeral home that I had never thrown away and never understood why I kept. In the photograph, you could see the birthmark clearly, right wrist, crescent moon. The baby was so small that the mark took up a significant portion of his wrist, but it was there and it was exact. I put the photograph on the table and looked at it for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and searched for Clifford Hargrove. He was 30 years old. Born April 14th, 1995, founded his first company at 24, sold it at 27, used the money to build a larger one. He gave almost no interviews. The few photographs I found showed him at industry events, always in the background, never at the center. One article from 3 years ago mentioned in passing that he had been adopted as an infant and raised in Connecticut. Adopted as an infant. I sat there until the sky started going gray outside the window. Then I showered, put on my uniform, and went to work. Clifford Hargrove was still checked in. His reservation ran 2 more nights. I switched shifts with Gerald, so I was working the VIP section both evenings. The second night, he came back to the same stool at the same time. We talked more. He asked about the lobby, said he had looked it up the year before when he was considering renting the penthouse for a longer stay. He told me the architectural firm on the original commission was listed as Whitfield Design Group. That's mine, I said. Was mine. He looked at me directly for the first time all evening. What happened to it? Divorce, I said. My ex-wife handled our business filings. When things went bad, she had more leverage than I did. I lost the firm in the settlement. That's a significant loss. It was. He was quiet for a moment, turning his glass slowly on the bar. What was her name? Diana Whitfield. She goes by Hartwell now. Something changed in his face. Not much, but I've been watching people across a bar for 5 years. And I know the difference between a man hearing a new name and a man hearing a name he already knows. I've come across that name recently, he said carefully. She's being considered for the State Bar Ethics Board. That's what I've heard. He didn't say anything else on the subject. We talked about the hotel, about the city, about architecture. He was sharp and easy to talk to, and at no point did he seem like a man who was carrying the same weight I was carrying. But when he left, he paused at the end of the bar and said, "I'd like to talk with you more, not here. Somewhere quieter." He left his card. I had already decided I was going to give him mine. We met 2 days later at a diner close to the hotel, corner booth, mid-morning, almost empty. He was already there when I arrived, coffee in front of him, both hands on the table. He told me straight. He had been adopted at birth. His parents, Stuart and Patricia Hargrove, had told him when he was 16. They were honest with him. The adoption had been private, arranged through a physician rather than an agency, and the paperwork was not standard. His biological mother was listed as deceased. No biological father was named anywhere in the file. The physician who arranged it was listed as Dr. Patricia Owens. I didn't recognize that name, but Clifford had done his research. Dr. Patricia Owens had worked at University Medical Center in 1995 as a neonatal specialist. Her primary collaborator at the time was a colleague named Dr. Frances Holloway. Frances Holloway had been our doctor. Diana had insisted on her specifically. She had said Holloway came highly recommended by a colleague. I put my coffee cup down. Holloway told me my son died. I said, she came into the room herself. She said his lungs hadn't developed enough, that it happened sometimes with premature births. How premature? Clifford asked. 14 weeks early, April 14th. He weighed just under 4 pounds. Clifford looked at his own hands on the table. I was born 14 weeks premature, April 14th, 1995. I weighed 3 pounds, 13 ounces, according to the medical record my parents kept. He paused. I was healthy, no complications. Neither of us said anything for a while. I'd like to order a DNA test, he said finally. Standard paternity test, certified lab, legally admissible results. I can have a kit here within 24 hours. Yes, I said, and I'd like to find Frances Holloway. So would I? We split the check. Outside on the sidewalk, before we went our separate ways, he stopped and looked at me in the morning light. He pushed his sleeve up. I pushed mine up. We stood there for a moment, both looking at the same mark on both our wrists. There was nothing to say that the marks didn't already say. Frances Holloway was 72 years old and living in a care facility 2 hours north of the city. Clifford found her in 4 days. He had people who could find things quickly, and he used them. The facility sat on a hillside with a view of the valley. Clean, well-maintained, the kind of place that costs enough to be quiet. A staff member met us at the front desk and told us Dr. Holloway was having a good day. She said that like it was important information, which I understood to mean that good days were not guaranteed. We found her in a sunroom off the main corridor. She was sitting in a chair near the window, small and white-haired, hands folded in her lap. She looked like someone's grandmother. She looked completely harmless. She looked up when we walked in, and I watched her face. There was a moment, just a second, when something moved behind her eyes. Not confusion, recognition. She covered it fast, but I had been watching for it, and I saw it. Clifford introduced himself. He said his name, his birth date, and then he pushed up his sleeve and held his wrist out so she could see the birthmark clearly. She looked at it for a long time without speaking. Then she looked at me. "You were the father," she said. "Yes," I said. She let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep. She looked out the window at the valley for a moment, then back at us. Her hands were very still in her lap. "Your wife came to me 8 weeks before the delivery," she said. Her voice was steady. Whatever she had spent 30 years preparing to say, she had prepared it well. She told me the pregnancy was a problem. That a premature birth with any complications would damage her career at a critical time. She had already spoken to Patricia Owens. The arrangement was in place before the child was born. What arrangement exactly? I said. If the child was born early and showed any sign of health issues, he would be transferred to Patricia's care and placed with a family that was waiting. A private adoption handled outside normal channels. Patricia had done it before in other circumstances. She knew how to manage the paperwork. And if he was healthy? Clifford asked. Holloway looked at him. Then the plan would be reconsidered. But your mother did not want to reconsider. When you were born, and it was clear within a few hours that you were going to be fine despite the prematurity, Diana had already made her decision. She told me the original plan stood. I kept my voice level. You told me he died. Yes, I held a baby. A small bundle they brought in and told me was my son. Holloway closed her eyes briefly, a stillborn from earlier that day. The parents had chosen not to see the infant. I told myself it was the most humane option available, that you were heavily sedated and in shock, and that what you were holding gave you something to say goodbye to. She opened her eyes. I have never once believed my own explanation. I want you to know that. Why did you go along with it? Clifford said. It was not really a question. Your wife knew about a case from 3 years before, a patient I had lost due to a judgment error. It had been handled internally and kept off my record. Deanna had the documentation. She made it clear that my cooperation was the only way it stayed buried. She paused. I chose my career over your son. That is the plain truth of it, and I have no defense. The room was quiet. Outside the window, a bird moved across the valley and disappeared into the tree line. We need a written statement, Clifford said. Signed and notarized, everything you just told us. I know, she said. I had my attorney draw one up 6 months ago. I have been waiting for someone to come. She looked at me directly. I'm sorry, Mr. Whitfield. I know that means very little. It means something, I said. Not enough, but something. Her attorney brought the documents the following morning. Clifford had his own attorney review them that afternoon. Everything Holloway had said in the sunroom was in the statement, clean and specific and legally usable. She had named Diana by name. She had named Patricia Owens. She had named the date, the hospital, the method. The DNA results came back 2 days later. Clifford called me and read me the number. 99.9998% probability of paternal relationship. I was sitting at my kitchen table with the shoebox open in front of me, the photograph facing up. That's confirmation, he said. Yes, I said. There was a pause on the line. I want to tell you something, he said. I have known I was adopted since I was 16. Stuart and Patricia were good parents. I had a good life. I'm not angry on my own behalf. Another pause. But I have been angry on yours since the moment you told me what Diana did, and I would like to help you do something about it if you're willing. I looked at the photograph on the table, the small face, the tiny wrist. Tell me what you have in mind, I said. Clifford laid it out over coffee at my apartment the following Saturday. He sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad and went through it the same way I used to go through a construction plan. Methodical, no wasted steps. We had 3 things, he said: the DNA result, Holloway's notarized statement, and a letter from Dr. Patricia Owens, now deceased, that Clifford's attorneys had located in a probate archive. The letter was addressed to a private placement attorney and referenced the Whitfield arrangement and a balance due upon confirmation of the child's health at 6 months. 3 separate documents from 3 separate sources, all pointing at the same thing. Diana had also, in the years since the divorce, developed a significant public profile. She sat on 2 nonprofit boards. She had been profiled in a legal trade publication as one of the top real estate attorneys in the state, and she was, as of 6 weeks ago, a finalist for appointment to the State Bar Ethics Board, a position that required a clean record and a formal review of her professional conduct. That review was ongoing. Clifford had one more piece of information. The Greystone Foundation, one of the city's larger philanthropic organizations, was hosting its annual gala in 3 weeks. Deanna was scheduled to receive their Family Law Advocate of the Year award at that event. He let that sit for a moment. I've been in contact with the Greystone Foundation, he said. My company has agreed to be the lead sponsor for this year's gala, which means I will be at that event in an official capacity. I understood what he was saying. You want to confront her there. I want to give her the option to handle this privately before it becomes a matter of public record. The gala is the right place because she cannot simply refuse to meet with me. I am the lead sponsor. She will have no reasonable way to avoid a brief conversation. And if she refuses to cooperate, then Monday morning, everything we have goes to the State Bar Disciplinary Committee and to 2 journalists who cover the legal community and who I have already spoken to off the record. He looked at me steadily. I'm not interested in destroying her publicly if she is willing to be accountable privately. But I am also not going to let her collect a family law award while this evidence sits in a folder. I thought about it. The version of me from 5 years ago, the one who sat in a conference room and watched Diana's attorneys dismantle everything I had built, would have wanted something louder, something public and immediate. But that version of me had also lost, and I was 58 years old, and I had learned some things since then. "What do you want from her?" I asked, a signed, notarized confession, full acknowledgement of what was done and her role in it. Withdrawal from the ethics board nomination, and the return of your ownership stake in Whitfield Design Group. She'll say it's extortion. Her attorney will say that. She will know it isn't. Extortion is demanding something you're not entitled to. You're entitled to every single thing on that list. The gala was on a Thursday evening. I wore a suit I had not worn since before the divorce. It still fit, which felt like a small victory. Clifford met me at the entrance. He looked exactly like what he was, the most important person in the room, which was useful. No one questioned why I was with him. Deanna was already inside when we arrived. I spotted her near the reception area, working the room the way she always had, moving from one conversation to the next with that particular ease she had, the kind that looks natural but is completely calculated. She was wearing a dark green dress and her hair was the same as I remembered, and she looked successful and comfortable and entirely at peace with herself. Then she saw me. She covered it in less than a second. That had always been one of her genuine skills. She finished her sentence to whoever she was talking to, excused herself, and crossed the room toward us, with a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Leonard," she said. "This is unexpected." "Diana," I said. She looked at Clifford. She knew who he was. I could see her running the calculation, trying to figure out how long we had known each other and how much damage had already been done. "There's a private room off the east corridor," Clifford said. "I've reserved it for the next 30 minutes. I'd like to show you some documents before the program begins." "I don't think this is the appropriate venue for whatever this is," she said. Her voice was calm and professional. "You're receiving an award tonight for your advocacy on behalf of families," Clifford said. "The documents are relevant to that topic. I think you'll want to see them before anyone else does." A long pause. 30 minutes, she said. The room was small, just a table and 4 chairs. Clifford laid the documents out in a row. DNA results. Holloway's statement. The Owens letter. He gave her time to read each one. I sat across the table and watched her face as she went through them. She was good. She kept her expression mostly neutral, but by the 3rd document, her hands had gone very still on the table. "These are serious allegations," she said finally. "They are serious facts," Clifford said. Deanna set the documents down and looked at the table for a long moment. Then she looked up at me. "I did what I thought was necessary," she said. "You were building a company, I was building a career. A premature baby with potential complications was going to change everything. That was not your decision to make," I said. "He was my son. You would have resented it. The late nights, the medical bills, the uncertainty. You would have blamed me eventually. You don't get to tell me what I would have felt." She looked away. Clifford slid a single page across the table. "These are our terms, a signed, notarized confession, acknowledging the full sequence of events and your role in them. Withdrawal from the ethics board nomination, submitted in writing by end of business Friday, and the return of Leonard's ownership stake in Whitfield Design Group, the percentage transferred during the divorce settlement." Diana's jaw tightened. "This is coercion. Your attorney is welcome to review the documents and advise you otherwise," Clifford said. "You have 48 hours. She took the terms page and left the room without another word. The gala continued outside in the main hall. We could hear the program starting, someone at a podium welcoming the guests. Her attorney contacted Clifford's office the next morning. By afternoon, we had a formal response. Diana intended to challenge the validity of the Holloway statement and file a harassment complaint against both of us. I had expected something like this. Clifford had too. His legal team filed the DNA results with the civil court the same afternoon, initiating a formal paternity proceeding. Once it was in the court system, it was public record. Diana's attorney called back within 2 hours. The tone had changed considerably. She signed everything on Friday morning. The confession was 4 pages, specific and unambiguous. The ethics board nomination was withdrawn that afternoon, citing personal circumstances. The paperwork transferring my ownership stake back to me arrived the following week. I did not feel what I expected to feel when I held those documents. I had imagined satisfaction, maybe, some sense of the ledger being balanced. What I actually felt was tired and quiet, and something that was not quite relief but was close to it. Clifford called that evening. "It's done," he said. "I know. How are you?" I thought about it. "I'm all right. How are you?" A pause. "I keep thinking about something. I've known I was adopted since I was 16. Stuart and Patricia told me straight and answered every question I had. I never felt cheated by them, but I also spent 14 years knowing there was a piece of the story they couldn't give me because they didn't have it. He paused again. I have it now, yeah, I said. You do. We drove to the cemetery on a Saturday in October. The maple above the headstone had gone completely red. The kind of red that looks almost unreal. Clifford stood with his hands in his coat pockets and read the stone. Nathan Gerald Whitfield, April 14th, 1995. What do we do with it, he asked. Leave it, I said. That stone is not really for a death, it's for the start of a lie. Marking where the lie began seems right to me. He thought about that. Then he crouched down and placed a small stone on top of the grave, something he said his adoptive family had done at every cemetery visit he could remember. A way of saying, I was here. I have not forgotten you. We stood there a while without talking. The wind moved through the maple and a few leaves came down, and that was the only sound. 6 months later, we broke ground on the Whitfield Center for Family Justice. It is a resource and legal aid facility for families separated through deception or legal fraud. The building design is mine, the funding is Clifford's. We named it after my family, not hers. On the morning of the groundbreaking, I stood on the empty lot with a set of drawings under my arm and Clifford standing next to me, and I thought about the lobby at the Harrington Grand. The room I designed and then ended up working in as a bartender. I used to think that was the cruelest part of what happened to me. Standing in my own work like a stranger, I don't think that anymore. That lobby was still mine regardless of who was paying me to stand in it. The work does not stop being yours just because someone takes the credit line off it. Same with a son. If you're watching this and you have been told that something you lost is simply gone, that there is nothing left to find and no point in looking, I want you to hear this. The truth has a way of holding on. It leaves marks. It shows up in the way a stranger taps his fingers on a bar, in a birthmark on a wrist, in a birthday that matches a headstone. 30 years is a long time, but it was not long enough to bury what was real. Do not let anyone tell you the story is over. Sometimes you just have not reached the part where the truth comes back around.